Hey everyone, how's it going today? And welcome back to another unemployment update, or just simply put video. Because in today's update, we're going to be taking a little bit of a change of pace and maybe talking about the other side of unemployment. So instead of about how to get onto unemployment programs, we're going to basically be talking today a lot more about tips and tricks about how to actually physically find a job. So if you happen to be someone that's currently employed or unemployed, and you're currently looking for work, or if you maybe happen to be someone that is actually employed, but you're looking to maybe find another job or to change your career, or simply put, to upgrade your career. Obviously, when it comes to unemployment, everyone has a very different circumstance. There are some people that maybe just cannot necessarily find work at this time, but I mean as in physically cannot even try to find work, and it could be for a whole bunch of reasons, whether this is because of childcare, other stuff that's going on, health related reasons, all sorts of different things. But if you are someone that's maybe currently on the job hunt search, trying to get a new job, or you're just trying to find a job in general, then this is the video for you. Now, I will maybe say a couple of key important points maybe before we begin is that we are going to be talking everything in today's video from the perspective of someone. If you are trying to enter into a career and say you have no experience, of course if you do have experience, then that's probably going to be even better. But say for example you're someone that either has no experience, how you can potentially find a job pretty much as soon as you hopefully can be. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of variation also depending on the specific kind of job you're looking for. So whether you are trying to find some kind of job that's remote and you can do it at home, or you're having to try to find a job that's actually physically in person, or maybe a bit of both. And I actually feel you on that side, because I'm actually someone that does actually prefer a little bit more of a hybrid kind of style job, so that you can work from home, but you can also kind of come in, at least for me, because I know for me on a personal level, I do still very, very much enjoy coming into work, at least being able to kind of socialize, much more for just health and just social lifestyle personality preferences. So we're going to try to cater to a little bit of everyone. So we're going to get started right away, but as always, maybe real fast before we begin, consider smashing the like button, because it is always greatly appreciated. I'm not at home right now, so you can probably tell I'm actually visiting someone else while we have this interesting backdrop that's going on. So I'm only going to be here temporarily, but as always, consider subscribing for similar videos like this, whether it comes to unemployment, finance, careers. I don't expect as many people to see this one, just because I do know that this is going to be a little bit of a shift from the traditional unemployment updates that we've been doing, but it's really going to be a new experience, and hopefully some people at least can find some relative insight to it. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts or questions, or honestly just really anything. So with that being said, let's get this video started. Now, the first advice that we're really going to share, of just many different kinds of advice that I can possibly give you, that we won't even be able to get to all of them in today's video. Of course, maybe by the end, feel free to comment if you do enjoy this and hope to maybe like to see more. But the first advice really to recommend is really about the resume. So when you are trying to find a job, one of the most important things is obviously just the resume. But what a lot of people don't actually physically know is what specifically about the resume to make it stand out. So when you're creating your resume, aside from the aesthetic part, of course, obviously, trying to make it look nice, there are many templates out there. One of the biggest advice is that you really want to try to make your resume very targeted and very specific to the specific job that you are trying to apply for. So this is really helpful, that you're able to hopefully increase the efficiency. So it's not just going to be a situation where, feel free to comment if you've ever faced this, where you're pretty much just sending 300 applications only to hear back from, one or two. Most of today's video is all going to be about efficiency. And one of the ways that you can do that is pretty much by trying to cater and really tweak up your resume to focus into what is actually related to the job. So how you can physically do that is that every single part of your resume that you're looking at, you want to just kind of ask yourself does this part of my resume relate to what that physical job is going to involve. This is actually even more true if you are trying to change careers and you're trying to go from something to something totally different. And I'm speaking as someone that actually has been there on a very first-hand basis. A little bit about my backdrop, just because it is relatively important to this, is that several years ago I did also have to go through a career change where I basically went from like the engineering, tech, construction based industry to go into what I do now is pretty much the advanced services, showbiz, marketing based industry, film based industry. So you can kind of see how, when you're taking a little bit of a shift, it can be very difficult and very, very challenging. Now, if you do have experience, on the other hand, then that is a really great thing. Then from here, the most important thing is just to make sure everything is very, very specific to the particular job. I will say maybe one thing though, and this is a very common thing, is that depending on your age, and this actually goes both ways, whether or not you're particularly older or you're particularly younger, is that it is very fair to say that many jobs right now, there is going to be a level of age discrimination sometimes. So if that is something that you're maybe a little bit fearful of, I do maybe would recommend to maybe try to take out the graduating year if you went to college, or try to shorten your resume. If you feel it's because you're particularly older, you can feel free to maybe shorten your resume, but the idea is to maybe basically just make it a little bit more vague what your particular age is. And it goes for both ways too. If you happen to be maybe a little bit younger, you can maybe try to just insert things, even if it's things such as like hobbies, clubs, activities, anything to try to basically give a little bit of a vague sense of your particular age. Of course, if you do meet them in person, it'll probably become a little bit more apparent, but at least it's just something to work with. And this is actually particularly true because I actually remember that when I had to change my career from my original corporate world to try to take a minimum. Now, the reason why I did that, that's probably a more interesting story. Some people have kind of been wondering, why would you change from a high-paying corporate to some kind of like lower minimum wage job? I did it a lot more for work flexibility and other kinds of reasons. But the idea is that to a lot of people's eyes, people would have wondered, why would I change from this job to, a much more lower paying job? I had my particular reasons. But see, because of that reason, one of the things is that in order to make that transition, I actually felt in a lot of ways, I actually had to downgrade my resume a little bit, or certainly is to basically just make it a lot more related to the job. So it didn't seem something like I was some very overqualified person that was trying to, step into that. And I definitely had a lot of questions from interviews. It actually made for a lot of interestingly great conversation. But the overall idea really is that you really have to tweak it up. And this may involve, not necessarily, I don't want to say downgrading, but just simply is maybe even just really changing up the experience or how you present yourself within the resume that you use. Now, the second advice that I really highly recommend, that I think actually can be its own video by itself, so maybe comment if that would be something of interest, but it's basically to maybe try to find the job at some kind of temporary agency. There are actually a lot of different jobs that sometimes will hire things for just very, very temporary quick projects. If you were to physically Google up temp jobs, temp agencies, you should be able to find something. And a lot of times this is actually especially true if you are basically someone that's looking for work during the holiday season. Obviously, I think the goal is to try to find a job that not just a good job, but a job that you maybe particularly actually feel like you would enjoy, that you would find as your dream job. But I think that at the very least, it is something to maybe just get the ball rolling, so you maybe can have something on your resume and just basically to bring a little bit of money in, especially during a time of relative need, if that is the case, particularly right now. And then probably the third thing, and I would say this is probably the most effective thing that I have personally found, is going to be through networking. Now, this topic itself is another topic that I can probably make a whole video about this story. But basically is that there is a lot of truth, actually, when you may have already heard the quote about how a lot of times it's a lot more about who you know than what you particular. Of course, the balance would be good. You ideally want a little bit of a both because you still have to do the job. But up to a certain point, especially if you are trying to pursue a particular job where there is not necessarily a particular quantitative, just basically a very objective way to measure who is a better worker, then one of the biggest things that you can particularly do, I really, really still believe to this day, especially if you don't have experience or especially if you're trying to break into a new industry, it's all going to be about networking, basically being able to meet people. I think that most people know this particular advice, but I think that very few people will actually try to understand the weight of how important this particular advice is, because most people, they just take it as a sentence. But I think few people will actually understand the weight of it, and even fewer people, I personally think, will actually do that particular something and try to carry through. But when it comes to the world of networking, there are several ways that you can do that. The first way is that if you are from a place that maybe just has a particularly large population of people, and you're comfortable doing it, because obviously we're still living in a pandemic, there are still many places that sometimes offer some kind of like in-person networking event. Depending on the industry you're in, I highly recommend that. Although you technically don't even necessarily have to go to an event particularly about your industry, because I do know, for example, in New York, and I'm only speaking because I'm from New York, although huge love to a lot of the other states, and I'm pretty sure there's stuff in most of the other states as well, but there's also a lot of events sometimes that are literally just professional networking events, not necessarily for a specific industry, but just for people in general. And I think a lot of times it's a very small world where you never know who you're going to be able to run into. Now, if, say, for example, going to an in-person event is out of the option, and then the best thing you can do is that you can also now do it through the internet. And I think most people here hopefully have some kind of internet connection if you're watching this. So through this, there are a couple ways that you can do it. The first way that you can do it is that you can pretty much try to find the contact of the employers or the hiring people, and then pretty much to try to just contact them and see if maybe you can basically just introduce yourself to see if there's a way that you can kind of keep in touch with them. At the very least, not necessarily just to get the job, of course that's the ultimate goal, but even if it has to be to just learn about the job. And I know that that's something that I did in my early life as well, when I was basically graduating college, was that because several years ago at that time, I also had a moment where I was trying to look for a job, but not just any job, but a job that I felt was relatively enjoyable. But sometimes I actually didn't even know what that job would even particularly be without actually physically working there. So by talking to a lot of different people, it's also even great on a personal growth level, because you're actually able to learn from people that are particularly there what it's actually physically like there. The other option is that if you're able to get onto LinkedIn, I highly recommend that, especially for most professional jobs. LinkedIn has a feature where you can actually try to message and find people to actually specifically network with. That's of course another video on its own, but it is something to at least look into. So with that being said, I think that's what we're pretty much going to cover in today's update. I think that's going to be it for today. There are so many things I can share. Maybe comment down below if you found this relatively insightful, or maybe if you're looking for more, feel free to comment that. But as always, consider smashing the like button if you guys haven't done so and made it this far. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell. And if you guys made it this far, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.